In Remnant 2, there are 3 elemental damage types you can use to your advantage in battle. This video will teach you everything you need to know about elemental mods and damage types. The 3 elements in Remnant 2 are Fire, Shock, and Acid. Each element has a damage over time component. For Fire, you inflict a dot called Burning, which deals fire damage per second. For Shock, you inflict Overload, which deals shock damage once every 5 seconds. Overload also has a hidden function. Targets that are overloaded and close by to one another increase the overload damage. For Acid, you inflict Corroded, which deals acid damage per second. Corrode also has a hidden function. It increases the damage taken by the target by 10%. I can check what the game considers elemental damage by using the alumni ring. I want you to take note of the way elemental damage is buffed. Notice that the elemental dot deals its element as damage. Basically, boosting an element's damage increases both the base element and the dot portion. Okay, what exactly do I mean by that? Take a look at these 3 talismans. Each one is responsible for buffing a respective element. First, the Talisman of the Sun buffs fire damage by 20%. In most cases, fire damage is damage you deal specifically, either through imbued bullets or direct mod hits. However, burning damage also deals fire damage per second, so it benefits from this 20% fire buff. These rules are also true for other elements. Let me show you how it works. In this example, I'll use an unupgraded repeater pistol with the Hotshot mod and the Talisman of the Sun. A single shot does 15 damage. The Hotshot mod also adds 15% range damage for a total of 2.25 extra damage. Since Hotshot imbues our bullets with fire, we add 20% to our basic shot, which is 3 extra damage. Add everything together and we get 20.25 damage, rounded down for our convenience. In Remnant 2, dots tick twice per second. Since we know Hotshot's burning lasts for 10 seconds, we know that there are a total of 20 ticks of damage. 17 times 20 is 340 damage.
Wait a minute!
Okay, I can see the tooltip says we should be doing 240 damage, so let me check my math. The Talisman of the Sun boosts burning damage by 50%, for a total of 100 extra damage. The Talisman also boosts fire damage by 20%, for a total of 40 damage. Add everything together, and that's 340 damage. The tooltip is wrong. Shock is easier to calculate. Using the same pistol, a basic shot is boosted by 20%, giving us 18 damage. Overload is increased by 50%, and further boosted by 20% by the shock damage, giving us a total of 59.5 shock damage, rounded up for display purposes. Okay, now Corroded gets a little funky. The 18 damage comes from the acid bonus, the same as the previous examples, so I'll skip that part. 14 damage times 20 ticks equals 280 damage. That's not what the tooltip says, so let's check. Adding up all the bonuses gets us to 255 damage, which matches the tooltip but doesn't match the actual dot. Don't forget that Corroded increases the damage the target takes by 10%, which when factored in matches our dot calculation. Okay, all that math is great, but I know the real question you are all asking. Is bleed an element?
No.
Unfortunately, elemental damage has no effect on bleed damage. What I can tell you is that bleed is physical damage. How do I know? By using the Shade Bloom Crystal. This amulet alternates every 5 seconds, buffing either physical or elemental damage. Take a look at the damage buff. When the buff icon is white, it is buffing physical damage, and the dot ticks are bigger. When the buff icon is purple, it is buffing elemental damage, and the dot ticks are smaller. Okay, we now know how we can buff our elemental damage. What are other ways we can boost our damage? Take a look at the Energized Neck Coil Amulet. This amulet boosts all status effects by 25% and explodes for 20% of the status effect's full damage. Keep in mind Burn, Overload, and Corrode are all status effects. This includes bleeding. You can tell the amulet is working when you hear this nice crunchy explosion, which happens whenever you inflict a status effect. Keep in mind you only get 1 explosion per status source, so Witchfire can't proc another explosion until its burning status expires. However, since Firestorm is another source of burning, it can trigger another explosion even though the target is already burning from Witchfire. These status application rules also apply to Corroded. Overload is unique because overload applications seem to stack from all sources. This means that multiple overload applications will only cause 1 neck coil explosion. In practice, this means you should aim to have multiple sources of status effects to maximize neck coil explosion uptime. Remember, you need a status effect to cause an explosion, so mods that deal direct elemental damage do not work. And just in case you didn't believe me, here's a clip of Bleed proccing the explosion. Now, I wanted to check if other status effects also cause an explosion. The Slow from Song of Aether and the Madness from Fargazer do not trigger explosions. To be extra sure, I tested if the status effect needed a damage component to cause an explosion. Unfortunately, Spore Bloom and Caltrops do not trigger an explosion. For the biggest explosions, you want to use dots with a high base damage. One good example is Aphelion's Supernova mod and Starshot's Big Bang mod. Keep in mind that the Energized Neck Coil's explosion is based off of the base dot damage, after it has been buffed by the amulet. This means that no matter how much we buff the dot's elemental portion, the Neck Coil's explosion damage does not increase. You can, however, increase the Neck Coil's explosion by using the Timekeeper's Ring. This works by doubling the duration of most status effects, effectively doubling the damage of the explosion. You can also increase the Neck Coil's explosion damage through all damage bonuses, as well as the explosion damage bonus from the Blasting Cap ring. Now, I'm gonna introduce a ring that changes the game for elemental damage. I don't know myself if this ring is functioning as intended. If the ring is bugged, then it will likely get patched. I'm only bringing this ring to your attention because this video is about elemental damage, and because this ring can have funny interactions. Here's how the Stone of Malevolence works. The more elemental damage you deal, the more mod power you generate. This is an example of how much mod power you generate using an unupgraded weapon and a plus 20 weapon. As you can see, the mod power generated scales with how much damage was dealt. This means if we boost the damage, either by buffing the elemental damage or hitting more targets, we generate more mod power per charge. The reason why the ring is bugged is because it allows you to charge mods even if you are actively using them. On the left, you'll notice that we are not building up to our next charge, but on the right with the Ring of Malevolence, you can see that we are building charge. With enough damage and generation, that means we can have essentially infinite mod usage. This can be achieved by slapping on extra sources of mod generation, like the Burden of the Follower and the Archon archetype. Also, quick note here, the Engineer has a flame turret, and yes, it works with the Stone of Malevolence. Dealing a consistent stream of elemental damage will allow you to spam mods. Although this level of spam is not realistic for general overworld play, with the right setup you can achieve something similar. Now, I'm going to go over some mods that I have found work best for mod generation. Firestorm is a fantastic mod, because if aimed properly, can stick to targets, following them around. It can also hit flying targets pretty easily, as well as have its range boosted with the Amplitude trait. Keep in mind that Firestorm can also vacuum in targets towards its center, often breaking the enemy AI and locking them in place. Don't forget that the center of the Cyclone deals fire damage for as long as the mod is active, and constantly applies and refreshes burning for its duration. Witchfire is also a good option. However, it is practically useless against flying targets. Because it has 2 charges and a fire and burning duration baked into it, it's great for building charge and spamming. Supernova is also great for building charge. Detonating the mod by shooting at the Nova with Aphelion's primary fire will cause it to explode, dealing 2 instances of fire damage and a pretty hefty burn. Next up are the elemental ammo mods. I personally gravitate toward the corrosive rounds for the extra crit chance and 10% vulnerability. With the Ring of Malevolence, you are likely able to completely recharge the mod with direct damage alone. And since activating any one of these mods refills your magazine from reserves, you can treat them as an upgraded reload button. For amulets, you can choose any of the elemental focused ones. This allows you to consolidate all your buffs into one element. For example, if you think Archon's Havoc form is cool, know that the Shock Device amulet and the Grounding Stone ring both buff that shock damage. Other options include an amulet I already talked about. The Energized Neck Coil is a great option if you just want quick wave clear and slight burst damage. Remember to include the Timekeeper ring, both to buff the explosion damage and to keep the status effect ticking for more mod generation. And if you're lazy or constantly swapping elements and mods, consider using the Chains of Application. Since most elemental applications inflict a status effect, this amulet provides quick and easy extra damage to your targets. For rings, you can use any of the elemental rings to double down into your favorite element. Also note the typo in the Acid Stone resistance, it's definitely not 15%. Another option is the Alumni ring, which functionally is the same as the elemental rings, just minus the elemental resistance. I mentioned it a couple times, but the Timekeeper's Jewel is great even without the Energized Neck Coil, purely for the additional status duration. Finally, the Burden of the Follower and the Stone of Malevolence are great for mod uptime. If you don't want to rely on the Stone of Malevolence, know that the mod generation from Burden of the Follower and the Archon archetype passives work well enough in keeping your mods charged. For traits, you will definitely want to take Kinship. Weird pick, I know, but notice that it reduces friendly fire damage you deal and take. A lot of the mods that I suggested will most likely kill you if you don't use Kinship. Additionally, Amplitude is very strong, making it so that AoEs like Firestorm and Supernova hit everything around you. Spirit is also good because more mod generation really doesn't hurt. There aren't a lot of mod-specific traits, so you can use the rest of your trait points for anything you want. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned at least one new thing. Leave a comment if you have any questions or feel that I missed something. Thanks for watching.